Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Tales of Herding God Part 79 based on novel. So let's start. The corpses of Daoist Kai Yun and Daoist Xiao Yuan collapsed onto the ground. Qin Mu put away his sword and raised his head to have a look. Long Jianan had already gone far away, the speed of the red snake really fast. It wouldn't be easy to catch up to her. Tonight, the messenger of death will have wandering souls to take away. It's just a pity that we didn't manage to send Long Jianan on her way as well. This woman is indeed very intelligent. She had also managed to escape in the battle in Heaven Wave City. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief. Now that Long Jianan was left by herself, it would be difficult for her to achieve anything. If she dared to come after him again, she would certainly die. The main reason why this battle had gone so smoothly was mainly due to everyone's coordination. After all, Daoist Kai Yun's cultivation and strength went low, and he wasn't any weaker than Long Jianan. Since Daoist Kai Yun carried a sword case, it meant that he was most proficient in sword battles. With Duqian Devil King blocking his swords with his 8 arms, Qin Mu could rush to Daoist Kai Yun's side without any worry. The Devil Ape's power lay in his incredible strength. With the Kakara staff and Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, the Devil Ape's strength was enough to stun Daoist Kai Yun, so Qin Mu could take his life in a single attack. Long Jianan's battle prowess lay mainly in the huge red snake, which was almost a flood dragon from all the refinement. The dragon Qilin, however, was a perfect match for the red snake. Once he pressed down the red snake with his strength, Long Jianan was no longer able to save Daoist Kai Yun. Because of this, the old man was doomed. However, now that Long Jianan had escaped, Qin Mu wasn't able to chase her, because he would definitely die if he went after her. His companions, Duqian Devil King, the Dragon Qilin, and the Devil Ape, sadly were not fast enough to catch up to her, so they could only let her escape. Big fella, did little Rulai of Little Thunderclap Monastery give you trouble? Qin Mu asked. The Devil Ape shook his head and pointed at himself. My name, Kong. Qin Mu waited for a moment. The Devil Ape was probably talking about his name in religion, but what religious name was only one word? Was it really Kong? And if not, then what was Kong? The Devil Ape thought that he had already understood and didn't say a word more. This Devil Ape treated his words like gold and would never say an extra one. It's good for you to follow Little Rulai to cultivate. Little Rulai knows Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and is a strange beast that achieved the Tao, so he's the most qualified to guide you on your cultivation. Qin Mu waved his hand and said, My elders are lost, so I have to go find them and can't stay here any longer. Come home when you're free, Ling misses you too. The two of them bade farewell. Qin Mu followed the direction pointed out by the messenger of death, and this time he no longer felt Long Jianan's gaze on him. The girl must have believed that she couldn't kill him and thus retreated. I wonder how the battle between Little Rulai and Daoist Ling Jing went. Even though Qin Mu kept thinking of that fight, finding village chief and the rest was more important. He sat down on the forehead of the Dragon Qilin, who began running forward, while Duqian Devil King chose to stand on the back, his 4 faces looking in 4 directions to take note of any movement in the surroundings. The deeper they went into great ruins, the stronger the strange beasts became. The abilities of some of them were no inferior to those of the Dragon Qilin or the huge red snake. Luckily, most of these strange beasts had their own territories. Having lived in great ruins since he was young, Qin Mu was quite the expert in differentiating between the territories of strange beasts, so they could easily avoid them on their journey and stayed relatively safe. If we continue on, we'll reach Eastern Heavenly Gates. Qin Mu recalled the geographical map of Great Ruins and the place in it called Eastern Heavenly Gates. Besides it, there were 3 more places that had the name Heavenly Gates, and they were obviously Northern, Western, and Southern Heavenly Gates. At that moment, the Dragon Qilin suddenly stopped and sniffed the air. There's a scent of blood. This fellow is a huge dog and not a Dragon Qilin. Duqian Devil King thought to himself. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly. Blood scent. Go and take a look. The dragon Qin followed the blood scent, and after a moment, Qin Mu saw an old daoist in the distance leaning against a tree while panting heavily. Daoist Ling Jing. Astonished, Qin Mu immediately called the dragon Qin to a stop. He has placed a restriction around him, so don't step into it. Daoist Ling Jing raised his head weakly and took a glance at him. As he took a breath, he suddenly coughed violently and vomited out a mouthful of blood. The eyes of Sword God's disciple are extraordinary. I'm injured, so I placed a restriction around myself to avoid getting engaged by the strange beasts. Qin Mu said, Daoist, I'm proficient in the art of healing. Do you need my help? Daoist Ling Jing raised his hand and lifted the restriction. He wanted to get up, but was unable to move, so he said while gasping for breath, come over. Qin Mu had the dragon Qin walk to the tree. He then jumped down from the head to examine Daoist Ling Jing's injuries. This elder was heavily injured, and these wounds were probably caused by little Rulai. The crucial point was that Daoist Ling Jing was pretty old and his body was not like what it used to be. This resulted in the injuries becoming even more severe, making it difficult for him to heal naturally. Qin Mu mumbled to himself, as he took out the dragon's saliva to treat external injuries. He then took out a few Spirit Buddha pills to repair the damage to Daoist Ling Jing's spirit. After that, he rummaged through his Daotai sack and took out some herbs he had bought in Imperial College for emergency usage. Even though there weren't many herbs, they were enough to create spirit pills for Daoist Ling Jing's injuries. Qin Mu made the spirit pills on the spot, with his hand techniques fast and perfect. Soon, a furnace of spirit pills was finished, and he let Daoist Ling Jing consume them. The complexion of Daoist Ling Jing turned for the better, and he said in astonishment, the disciple of Sword God actually has such high attainments in the art of healing. Little Dao friend, won't you be my disciple? I have a lot of enemies and with you by my side, you could assure my safety. Don't worry, even though the old Sword God is powerful, what I can teach you won't be any worse than him. Qin Mu shook his head. I'm the cult master sacred teacher of heavenly devil cult, so I can't become your disciple. So it's the devil cult master. Daoist Ling Jing struggled to get up, then bowed in greeting with a respectful face. I thought I was above you in seniority, never expecting us to be senior brothers of the same seniority. Ling Jing pays respects to devil cult master. Qin Mu immediately returned his greeting. Senior brother Ling Jing is too polite. Your injuries are not a problem now, but if you want to get rid of them from their roots, you will have to nurse yourself to health. Daoist Ling Jing smiled. Seems like it was the right choice to give you those 2 Fungju coins. The old Sword God still owes me 2 Fungju coins, but I reckon that guy won't return them to me. He's pretty stingy, having even chopped off one of my fingers back then. He opened up his right hand and said, see. The ring finger on his right hand was gone, and it was clearly a sword wound. If it was not for this broken finger, how would little Rulai of Little Thunderclap Monastery have been able to injure me this heavily? However, his injuries are pretty severe as well. Without a divine physician at his side, I reckon he will have to roll back to Little Thunderclap Monastery and suffer for 2 to 3 years before fully recovering. Daoist Ling Jing let out a pent-up breath. That fellow is younger than me and has a good foundation. He was the disciple of the previous Rulai, and is the junior brother of the current Rulai. When the previous Rulai passed on the position to his senior brother, the little Rulai was indignant and felt that the reason why the previous Rulai had not passed on the position to him was because he was from the demon race. So he had slaughtered his way out of Great Thunderclap Monastery and founded Little Thunderclap Monastery. That's right, why are you wandering in the depths of great ruins alone? Qin Mu mixed a few herbs together and brewed a medicinal decoction. The elders of my village have lost their way, so I've come out to look for them. Elders of your village? Daoist Ling Jing was bewildered. It's none other than Old Sword God and the other elders. Among them are Jade Face Poison King, Thief God, Ma Wangshan, and also my heavenly devil cult patriarch. Has senior brother met them? Daoist Ling Jing was startled. Suddenly, he began laughing until tears almost rolled down his cheeks. The injuries that had just fused split open once more and made this elder suck in a cold breath from the pain. Old sword god and heavenly devil cult patriarch have lost their way. These two old goofballs, they actually lost their way. He laughed until he couldn't breathe, and Qin Mu immediately said, "Stop laughing, your wounds have opened up again. Has senior brother seen them?" "I haven't." Daoist Ling Jing shook his head. Qin Mu then took out the portraits of Old Ma, Granny Sai, and the rest to ask, "In that case, what about them?" Daoist Ling Jing took a look at the paintings and pondered. "I saw this blacksmith carrying a chest. His speed was very fast and his ability was no weaker than mine. When I met him, we even competed with our leg power. He didn't say a word and had a weird temper. It's rare to meet this kind of strong practitioner, but I had never heard of such an expert before." Qin Mu's spirit was aroused. "That's Grandpa Mute from my village. Does senior brother know where he went?" Daoist Ling Jing replied, "He went into a restricted area. It's very treacherous there, so it's one of the most dangerous grounds in Great Ruins. I chased him all the way to that dangerous land, but did not go in. He's a mute. No wonder he gave me the cold shoulder when I was talking to him." Grandpa Mute went to a restricted area in Great Ruins. Qin Mu became nervous again, and he thought for a moment before asking, "Has senior brother heard of Carefree village before?" "Carefree village?" Daoist Ling Jing shook his head. "I've not heard of it before." Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely for a moment. Daoist Ling Jing frequently wandered around Great Ruins, and knew numerous secrets that no one else knew. If even he didn't know where Carefree village was, Qin Mu had little hope to find Carefree village by himself. He pondered over it before suddenly asking, "Senior brother, can I ask you for a favor? I would like to go to the living realm of the dead once more." Daoist Ling Jing smiled. "This is simple. When the night comes, I'll bring you there." Qin Mu calmed himself down and healed the other's injuries, so when the night arrived, Daoist Ling Jing had pretty much recovered. He immediately brought them into the darkness of Great Ruins and said, "Living realm of the dead is the territory of the King of Hell. This world is very mysterious and the two worlds only overlap at night. If you want to enter the living realm of the dead, you need to have Fungju coins. I've signed a contract with the King of Hell to not go to Yudu after I die, but straight to Fungju." Looking around, he took out a token and shone it towards the darkness. The origin of Fungju is very weird. It doesn't have a fixed location, but floats here and there in Great Ruins, creating a very mysterious world by itself. I have a token of Fungju, so as long as I activate it, an envoy of Fungju will come and fetch me. Just as he was saying that, a light came shining over from the middle of two large mountains. Daoist Ling Jing immediately brought Qin Mu over there. That light was sometimes bright and sometimes dim, guiding them on their way. Without noticing it, they passed by a couple large mountains and got closer to that light only to see it was but a ball of a will-o'-the-wisp which suddenly vanished. The jade pendant on Qin Mu's chest gave off a ghostly light, and slowly floated upwards to lead the way. Daoist Ling Jing brought Qin Mu and the rest forward until they passed through what felt like a formless barrier. The sight in front of them suddenly changed and the vastly mysterious living realm of the dead appeared in front of them. There, they could only see a small boat sailing unhurriedly through the sea of fog among the countless white bone mountains. Daoist Ling Jing brought Qin Mu and the rest to the boat, and the skeleton inside brought them into the dense fog. After some time, they reached the docks. The stone tablet of the living realm of the dead was right in front of them. Daoist Ling Jing asked curiously, "Devil Cult Master, what are you coming here for? Your cultivation is too weak, so even if you sell your soul, Fungju won't want it." Qin Mu walked forward, passing by an empty village. After crossing the huge mountain in front of them, he saw the incomparably large moon ship that lay in front of Fungju. It was like a three-legged toad that was carrying an enormous ship. Once he said it, he said solemnly, "I'm here to borrow a ship." Borrow a ship? Daoist Ling Jing was stunned for a moment, while Qin Mu sprinted over rapidly. He broke through in no time, and landed on the moon ship in a few steps. On his chest, the jade pendant which he wore since he was young floated up even higher, and the light coming from it became even brighter. Jiutian Devil King looked around, incredibly shaken as he muttered, "Is this a god artifact? Visitor from Carefree village." On the moon ship, which was in a mess, the ruined star in the sky turned into fireballs which descended non-stop, making the situation quite dangerous. A strange, trembling voice rang out. "You're from Carefree village. What are you here for?" "I'm not a betrayer, I only escaped. Their deaths are not my fault, they're not my fault. I'm just a coward." Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and came to the center of the moon ship. In the middle of several huge pillars, a face of several acres, that was stuck to the ground looked at the jade pendant floating in front of his chest in terror. "Not my fault. I didn't betray my tribesmen," that face shrieked. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment, then let out a shaky breath and stretched out his palm to touch one of the pillars. Daoist Ling Jing frowned. "I've been here before and there was nothing here except for this lunatic. I've checked these pillars before as well, but there were no abnormalities." "Don't touch," that face shouted in despair. When Qin Mu's palm touched the huge pillar, an incomparably terrifying energy suddenly came pouring into his body. Cracking sounds rang out all around him as his body grew taller and bigger. The divine energy that came pouring in caused his body to undergo a dramatic transformation. He felt his tailbone growing frantically, turning into a third leg that grew out from his back and landed steadily on the ground. Bones and flesh also rapidly grew under his armpits, turning into arms. Bang! 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 Qin Mu stretched out his arms and grasped the other pillars. Everything in his surroundings seemed to shrink rapidly, but that was just a misconception. He was actually the one becoming larger. Due to the divine energy of moon ship reconstructing his body, deafening explosions came from his body. This noise originated from all the divine treasures opening within him. In the blink of an eye, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, and life and death divine treasures had all opened up. The divine bridge divine treasure had even opened up and reached straight to the opposite shore. Qin Mu couldn't resist howling, and as he did so, the incomparably enormous moon ship gradually stood up. Then, the broken moon floated into the distance. Daoist Ling Jing's expression changed drastically, and he moved back continuously. Jiutian Devil King and the Dragon Qilin were also forced to move back by Qin Mu's aura. Even when they were thousands of yards away from him, they still couldn't get a stable footing. Meanwhile, under Qin Mu's feet, the face of the Moon Guardian had sunk into the moon ship by the pressure from the feet. Originally, he had still been hanging by a thread, but when he got stepped onto, he fused completely with the moon ship, becoming part of it and dying. The old Moon Guardian died. Daoist Ling Jing was shaken. The death of the old Moon Guardian didn't concern him since this person was a lunatic, but the growth of Qin Mu's body attracted all of his attention. The youth had actually broken through the shackles of the living realm of the dead. When entering the living realm of the dead, even existence like Daoist Ling Jing would have their blood and flesh stripped off, leaving him a walking skeleton. When Qin Mu had entered here with him, he was also left with only his bones. It was the same for the Dragon Qilin, while Jiutian Devil King sported no changes only because he had no flesh or bones. And then, not only had Qin Mu's flesh returned, his body had also become larger and larger, as if he was a heavenly god with divine light surrounding him. He replaced the last Moon Guardian of the Moon Herders to become the new Moon Guardian. The power which he controlled now was too strong, so it broke through the limitations of the living realm of the dead, which resulted in them being able to do nothing. This was something that was nearly impossible. Daoist Ling Jing had come to this moon ship many times and examined everything here numerous times. He had touched the pillars countless times, but he had never undergone such an astonishing transformation like Qin Mu. He had thought that only the Moon Herders had this ability, and not even all of them. Just the ones who had a special constitution. The human body is like a large smelting furnace. An ordinary moon herder should not be able to contain the terrifying energy from the moon ship, so only those with a special constitution could receive such a large amount of energy. The moon herders should have been wiped out, with this elder on the ship being the last of them. However, he had now also sunk into the moon ship and lost his life. For Qin Mu to be able to control the moon ship and its energy, could he be a moon herder, and one with a special constitution among his kind? However, Qin Mu was not a moon herder. Grasping the huge pillars was considered an abnormally dangerous act to other people, even if they were moon herders. However, it was very safe for him to do it. It was as if his body could naturally withstand this energy, and automatically reconstruct his body and soul to handle it. What powerful energy! Qin Mu was surprised and delighted. The energy in his body had reached an unimaginable realm, which gave him a sensation that his previous power was like a water droplet in front of the ocean. It was simply insignificant. Now, with just a raise of a hand, he felt like he could change the landscape, to change and even control the rules of the world. Rings of moonlight covered Qin Mu's surroundings. Those rings seemed to flow down from the top of his head like flowing water, going down to the bottom of his feet before disappearing into the moon ship. His feet had already started to sink inside, fusing with the ship. This was moon ship's counterattack. Qin Mu had once seen this kind of counterattack on the body of the Sun Guardian of the Sun ship. Sun Guardian was Sun herder Yang Jing. Since the sun of the Sun ship had been extinguished, she had to bear the counterattack of the Sun ship by burning her life to control and receive its immense energy. The longer she controlled the Sun ship, the faster her life was drained away. The broken moon above the moon ship was also extinguished, and had no light emanating from it. For Qin Mu to control the ship and borrow its energy, the price was his own life. He had to move quickly and borrow the power and speed of the moon ship to delve deeper into the darkness to find Carefree village, village chief, and the other villagers. Otherwise, the price would become too huge for him to bear if he wanted to break free. Senior brother Ling Jing, thank you for your help. Qin Mu looked down at him from above and said in a booming voice, but now, I have to find village chief and the rest while the darkness is still here, farewell. Daoist Ling Jing suppressed the shock in his heart, and flew off the moon ship to float in mid-air. This Daoist was now a skeleton, and the Daoist robe on his body had also become tattered. Raising his head, he said, Cult Master, please. Boom. The enormous moon ship took a stride. Below the body of the ship was the shape of a three-legged toad formed by the majestic mountains. With a step, they could cover 10 miles. With a few steps, the moon ship walked out of the gate of Fungju with its chains dragging the broken black moon still in mid-air out of the living realm of the dead. Meanwhile, in Fungju, the strong practitioners all flew out to see the traces of the moon ship leaving into the distance. These strong practitioners of Fungju didn't give chase. When moon ship had entered Fungju back in the day, Yama of Fungju had not received the moon guardian. He only let the moon ship stay at the wasteland outside the city. Now that the moon ship was leaving, Yama of Fungju didn't bother to pay attention to it. A bird-headed and human-bodied mutant came flapping over, and called out to Daoist Ling Jing. Daoist Ling Jing, Yama requests the pleasure of seeing you. Daoist Ling Jing immediately followed him into Fungju, and walked into the hall of Yamaraja. At this moment, tens of thousands of yards of light shone from Qin Mu's body, which made him look like a heavenly god that was crafted from a moon. He controlled the enormous ship to walk out of the living realm of the dead, cross the sea of fog, and enter the great ruins which were shrouded in darkness. He could feel the boundless energy in his body, and every single one of the divine treasure in his body was opened. No matter if it was spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death or divine bridge, they were all filled with terrifying energy, and there was still even more energy pouring in. On the inside of the moon ship were incomparably complicated formations, and when his palm had gotten into contact with the huge pillar, the formations had been activated. Boundless energy poured into him to reconstruct his body, his soul, his spirit embryo, and allow his realm to surpass divine bridge, reaching an unimaginable realm. The realm of heavenly gods. It was hard to imagine what kind of realm this energy would reach if this was a complete ship. Carefree village, village chief, I'm coming. As the huge moon ship moved forward through the darkness, the scenery around it flashed past like flickering lights and passing shadows. The jade pendant on Qin Mu's neck had also become huge and floated up in the night to point towards a faraway place in the darkness. Suddenly, this jade pendant came off from his neck and flew into the distance. Qin Mu controlled the moon ship to increase its speed to not lose the jade pendant, which was flying swiftly through the darkness. As the ship moved faster, it compressed the space, which caused thunder and lightning to occur at the same time, tearing apart the darkness continuously. Above the moon ship, there were huge rocks crashing down continuously from the broken moon. As they streaked across the sky, they left trails of fire as they descended into the darkness of great ruins. Wherever the moon ship walked, meteors fell in its wake. This caused the surroundings of moon ship to be filled with fire and smoke, stinging the eyes. On the deck of the moon ship, there were too many palaces to count. This was where the moon herders had lived, but after a great battle, they had all been wiped out. The last moon herder was the moon guardian, but even he was consumed by the moon ship when Qin Mu became the new moon guardian. Jiutian Devil King and the dragon Qilin hid in a palace that had yet to collapse so as to avoid Qin Mu's world-shaking aura. The dragon Qilin soon shut his eyes from all the shaking and fell asleep. Jiutian Devil King was not sleepy, so he looked out from the window of the palace. He could see the majestic Qin Mu standing at the center of the pillars like a tall mountain. His power had materialized into the rings of moonlight that were falling down his body, and they were extremely terrifying. This world is not as lowly as I thought. These god artifacts require an extremely profound path, skills, and divine arts. It's not something that an ordinary civilization could create. Jiutian Devil King's gaze wavered, and he found himself at a loss. Am I really going to invade such a world? What worries me are actually not the heights which the civilization of this world had reached, but the thing that had destroyed something like it. Countless monsters in the darkness of great ruins were alarmed and surged over. Even though these monsters were massive in size, they weren't that great when compared to the moon ship. They were like ants and were slow as well. The moon ship crushed all of them, and among the constant booms, crunching sounds could also be faintly heard. It was hard to say how many mysterious organisms had been flattened into pancakes and turned into a pile of mush in the darkness. There were countless devils pouncing towards the moon ship as well, and devil voices could be heard. These devils were trying their best to board this land ship, but they were immediately killed by the lightning created by the movement of the moon ship, and their corpses dropped down like rain. Candra Nova, Sanskrit, moon ship. In the darkness, a terrifying aura surged forth as a black figure became bigger and bigger. With feathers like clouds, it flew over from the darkness and leaped into the thunder layer formed by the moon ship, bringing devil clouds to invade it. From the devil clouds, the enormous devil popped out its heads, and all 9 of them spewed devil flames towards Qin Mu, who was at the center of the pillars. The blazing flames lighted up the night sky, and the body of the enormous devil rolling back into the clouds could be seen. It seemed like a bird, but a flood dragon as well. It was as if the devil was a monster that was a fusion between the 2 different species. Garuda. Jiutian Devil King cried out in astonishment. Moonlight lingered around Qin Mu's body, blocking the devil flames. Suddenly, a crescent opened up in the heart of his brows and slowly turned into a full moon like a door opening. Soon, a full moon appeared in the heart of his brows. This wasn't a real full moon, but an eye that was giving off a light that was similar to moonlight. Pew! A snow-white light flashed across the horizon and sliced apart the darkness. It cut through the devil flames that filled the sky, and the heads of the devil started to fall from mid-air. There were exactly 9 heads, no more and no less, while behind them were necks that were squirming like dragons and spurting blood. Expect that there were. The full moon on Qin Mu's forehead slowly closed and turned into a crescent again, which disappeared as well. Jiutian Devil King shut his mouth and didn't say a word. After this brat let me go. I'll definitely not invade this twisted world. The moon ship continued traveling forward while devils continued to surge towards it. Suddenly, shrieks came from the darkness, and the countless devils suddenly retreated, disappearing into the darkness. Qin Mu's jade pendant, which was floating in front of the ship, looked incomparably small, as though it was a speck of dust. Suddenly, it clanked as though it had collided with a formless barrier. As if it was water of the lake stretching vertically from the heaven to the earth, ripples started to gently undulate on the barrier. They spread out with the jade pendant at the center, growing larger and larger. Meanwhile, at the center of the ripple, another world was gradually showing the tip of its grandeur. This was Carefree Village. Qin Mu stood on the majestic moon ship with his hands stretched out to hold the pillars. He was like a giant getting punished as he looked at the world that had appeared in front of him. Behind him, the broken moon floated in the sky while meteors fell down from time to time. As they crashed around the moon ship, the incomparably black darkness was lighted up. Behind the light, the devils were in a disorder. They were bustling with activity and making a commotion. In front of the ship, however, was a pure land that had never been invaded by the darkness. It was cut off from the rest of the world, tranquil, mysterious, and filled with the unknown. It was hard to imagine that there was such a serene place in great ruins. In front of Qin Mu were a vast forest and an endless mountain range. However, at a place farther away, the ground was suddenly cut off as if it was emptied out by someone. With the sea and clouds separating them, there was a city that stood tall and upright in mid-air. It was like the place where immortals lived. The sky was filled with golden clouds and light, while below palaces towered into the cloudy heaven. Floating high up in the clouds was an unbroken chain of mountain peaks, which revealed their bright golden peaks. In the depths of the clouds, majestic god statues stood like an emperor protecting his territories. A huge machinery floated 3,000 yards away from the sky, operating quietly. Countless formations were imprinted into the mysterious iron and gold structure, forming an incomparably complicated large-scale machine. Energy produced by it materialized into trails of flowing light, which connected the city and the sky. However, everything was already destroyed. Qin Mu was stunned. In front of him was a ruined Carefree village. The one dazzling sky city was now a ruin. The palaces that towered into the clouds were riddled with holes, and the unbroken chain of peaks that was floating in the sky had been smashed and shattered. Broken rocks of all shapes and sizes floated in the sea of clouds, while majestic god statues stood slanted, missing limbs here and there. In the middle of the sun in the sky was a huge black dot, which had already swallowed more than half of the sun. Only the golden halo around it remained, looking like a golden hoop. The city above the clouds had been destroyed, and the great machinery that stood upright in the sky was broken as well. Its shattered components floated quietly around. Only a couple huge pieces of machinery remained operating, maintaining the barrier of Carefree Village. Not far from the moon ship, there was a horizontally inscribed board stabbed diagonally into the forest. On that toppled overly large inscribed stele, 2 words were written. They said Xiao Pao. The horizontally inscribed board was broken. A pang of sorrow suddenly surged through Qin Mu, and it grew frantically until it filled his whole heart. There was no Carefree Village in this world anymore. There was no place to be carefree anymore. This giant, who was standing on the moon ship and holding the pillars, seemed to be bearing the punishment of heaven as he lowered his head. He knelt down, and tears dripped droplet by droplet onto the solid floor. The home that he longed for had already been destroyed, and nothing remained of it anymore. He had looked for such a long time, fantasized about his home in his dreams, his family, neighbors, and friends, but all of them had suddenly been shattered with the appearance of this world in front of him. It was like a drawing done on the sand, vanishing with the gust of a wind. There was no longer any home, any mother waiting for her son, any stern father. All of the things he had fantasized about were no longer there. He awoke from his dream. He was still the orphan adopted by the numerous old, weak, sick, and elderly people. His hometown was gone. Juqian Devil King raised his head and looked out the window to see the giant kneeling among the pillars. The giant that was shrouded in the hazy moonlight had his face facing downwards, so only the shaking of his shoulders could be seen. At this moment, Juqian Devil King could well imagine the youth's pain. When his Juqian world was annihilated, he had felt the same sorrow. He was inconsolable and couldn't suppress his emotions. While he was bawling, he blamed the world, and with his overflowing anger, he had fought with the messengers of death from Yudu, trying to save the lives of his clansmen. He was struck down countless times, and his body was broken along with his soul. Then, he had finally submitted himself to fate. In Qin Mu, he saw himself the past, the him when he was young, the him that was about to be struck down and submit to fate. When life is weak and one's direction is lost, coming and going like a lunatic. When playing in the mud, it's hard to know the luminosity of a pearl. How many trials and how many hardships, how much obliteration must one suffer to temporarily return back to fear? Where is home? Where is my home? Qin Mu gradually raised his head up with a cold gaze. His eyes were like the bright luster given off by the moon. When he closed his eyes, that light vanished, but when he reopened them, they were like two bright moons. As he stood on the moon ship, his emotions rose and fell as myriads of thoughts went through his mind. He was unable to calm down for a long time. I didn't come here to find Carefree village, but to search for village chief, granny, and the rest. They are my kin and disabled elderly village is my hometown, it's the Carefree village of my heart. Qin Mu composed himself and looked around. Suddenly, he saw a couple of stone statues placed at the border of the barrier. Even existences of the god realm would find it hard to travel through the darkness of great ruins unless they were carrying god statues. However, god statues were extremely dense, and even existences of cult master level would find it hard to carry them. They would be unable to travel far with them. The stone statues at the edge should have been transported here using great magical power to force the darkness back. After entering Carefree village, these stone statues were no longer useful and was thus left behind. Qin Mu's heart stirred. Village chief could have brought apothecary to walk in the darkness and deal with all kinds of strange peculiarities, while Mute should have a method of his own to deal with the darkness. As for Old Ma, cripple, butcher, and blind, they would have needed the stone statues to be able to move in the darkness. Old Ma, cripple, and butcher's body had already recovered, so they could walk a longer distance while carrying a god statue. No one knew the extent of Deaf's abilities, but not even ghosts and gods dared doubt the greatness of his painting skills. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was his hardcore admirer, who took honor in collecting his paintings. While what concerned Granny, the previous cult master Li Tianxing was hidden in her body so she should be able to carry the god statue as well. These statues here should have been left behind by the villagers. In that case, they must have found their way here. Could it be that they entered this place and got trapped, which is why they couldn't return to the village for New Year's? Qin Mu opened his eyes and looked around. Vigorous energy poured into his eyes, and he executed the 9 Heavens Eye awakening skill that Blind had taught him to its maximum. I'm here. Village Chief, Granny, I'm going to bring you guys back for New Year's. He didn't step into Carefree village straight away, but first checked it out from outside. Village Chief and the rest were extremely strong, so if they had really entered Carefree village, it wouldn't look as serene as it was now. There must be no lack of danger inside, because of which they got trapped. Even the moon ship couldn't guarantee Qin Mu's safety. His gaze landed on the forest in front of Carefree village, and saw the traces that village chief and the rest had left. The divine arts of great practitioners, like village chief and Mute, would cause astonishing damage to the surroundings. However, this wasn't the case by the forest. Although there were traces of a battle there, the damage wasn't extensive. Qin Mu's gaze followed the traces, and saw a few ruins in the forest. The path that village chief and the rest had taken went along them. The reason why the path was along these ruins was that this was the only path, the only safe way to enter Carefree village. Other than this path, every other place was restricted. Qin Mu looked with 9 Heavens divine eyes, and saw faint rays of light, which were extremely treacherous in the forest. However, he couldn't see what the restrictions were. These restrictions were extremely dangerous, so the path along the ruins was much safer in comparison. Qin Mu continued to stare fixedly forward. At this moment, he saw a few strands of fine light bursting forth from a ruin, which was about 300 miles away from him, but not far from the end of the forest. Qin Mu's vital chi burst forth, and he plucked down the jade pendant from the barrier. Activating moon ship, he took a stride forward and entered the barrier. HNNN. A gentle tremor came over him, and he felt like he had crossed into another world. The darkness, which shrouded great ruins, instantly vanished behind him, and when he turned his head to look behind, he could see nothing. At this moment, he suddenly heard weird laughter. Countless devils that had been hugging the body of moon ship leaped off the ship, and surged into the forest like a flood. A devil god that had 2 heads and 5 tails rose into the air. She also had 8 long legs, which had palms instead of feet, which she used to scurry through the air while shouting sternly, Vada, Sanskrit, kill. Juqian Devil King jumped in shock. He totally didn't expect that there would be so many devils secretly hiding on the ship in the cover of darkness. The devil god turned her head back and chuckled at Qin Mu, who was on the ship. Fancy finding by sheer luck what one has been searched for far and wide. We had wanted to enter Carefree village for quite a long time, so we must thank you for leading us here. This devil god was none other than that one Qin Mu and village chief had met in the living realm of the dead. It was also this devil god who had lured Qin Mu out into the darkness after he had met the sun ship in Border Dragon City to kidnap him. It was evident that this devil god had long ago hidden herself on the moon ship to wait for a chance. She seemed to have known that Qin Mu would definitely return to the living realm of the dead one day and borrow the moon ship to return to Carefree village. And now, she had finally succeeded. My children, take over the last of the pure land. From today onwards, this world shall be ours. That devil god cried out and brought the omnipresent devils to surge towards the other end of the forest. Qin Mu was expressionless as he gazed at these heavenly devils. Suddenly, a cryptic pulse came from the forest and the flesh and bones of the tens of thousands heavenly devils that had surged forward melted away. Only their skin was left, but when the gust of wind blew past, even it turned into ashes and scattered away. The devil god, who had rushed into the sky above the forest, instantly rushed out. Sapaami. A huge whirlpool appeared and sucked her in. Qin Mu had seen this method before. When fighting against the village chief, that devil god had created the space leading to the other shore and pulled village chief into it, trying to trap him there. Never had she then expect to fall inside it as well. Now she had executed this method not to trap anyone, but to avoid the danger in the forest by hiding in the other shore. Right then, a ball of fire rose from the forest, and a beam shot out from it into the depths of the space. In the sky, a trail of fresh blood flowed out, and the corpse of that devil god appeared fell down. Once it crashed into the forest, the corpse turned into ashes. On the moon ship, Juqian Devil King was quiet out of fear, his blood running cold. This goddamn world, can it not be so treacherous? The pure white moonlight in Qin Mu's eyes drifted like mist, and a booming voice sounded out as he muttered to himself, your deaths have affirmed my guess. This restricted area is not to defend against any invasion of enemies, but to prevent people of Carefree village from walking out. It was left behind by the existence that destroyed great ruins. This video will end here.